By sunrise, everyone who watched Avery Miller lose her pack would learn one terrifying truth. The forest had not come to bury her. It had come to choose her. "Hold her still," Beta Grant Hayes said, his voice carrying over the frozen courtyard of Silverpine Pack like a sentence already signed. Snow drifted through the yellow torchlight, soft and silent, too beautiful for a night this cruel. Avery stood in the center of the circle with her wrists bound in front of her, her thin white dress whipping around her knees, her pale skin almost colorless beneath the winter moon. No one stepped forward. Not the women who had eaten beside her in the kitchens. Not the boy she had patched up after training. Not even Caleb, the young warrior who had once promised she would never have to face another full moon alone. He stood near the stairs with his jaw locked and his eyes fixed on the ground, as if looking at her would make him guilty. Grant lifted the silver seal for everyone to see. It was no larger than a coin, engraved with the broken circle symbol every wolf feared. Packless, a name worse than exile, a name that meant no protection, no shelter, no witness, no mourning. Avery's wolf stirred weakly inside her chest, not with rage, but with heartbreak. She had been called useless before. She had been given scraps, shoved to the back of every line, handed the coldest blankets and the heaviest work. But until tonight, some small, foolish part of her had believed a pack, even a cruel one, was still a home. Grant stepped closer. "Avery Miller," he announced, "for repeated disobedience, weakness of blood, and burdening this pack beyond mercy, Silverpine releases you." A murmur passed through the crowd, low and hungry. Avery raised her chin. Her breath trembled in the air, but her voice did not. "I carried water for your sick. I warmed food for your children. I never betrayed this pack." Grant smiled as though kindness were the most ridiculous defense in the world. "Kindness is not strength." The silver seal touched her wrist. Cold rushed through her so sharply that the world narrowed to the sound of her own heartbeat. The mark appeared without flame, without spectacle, just a dark, clean symbol settling over her skin like a locked door. The bond that tied her to Silverpine snapped into silence. One moment, she could feel the distant pulse of hundreds of wolves around her. The next, there was nothing. No pack warmth. No shared breath. No invisible thread to tell her she belonged somewhere in the world. Avery swayed, but did not fall. That seemed to disappoint them most. Grant leaned close enough for only her to hear. "The forest is 10 miles deep before the next border. No fire, no coat, no one waiting. If the cold takes you, it will be kinder than what the wild things do." Then the gates opened. Beyond them, the pines stood black against the snow, their branches bent like old judges. 2 guards walked her past the boundary stones and left her there, barefoot in the white hush beyond Silverpine Law. The gates closed behind her with a heavy final sound. Avery stood alone beneath the winter sky, the packless mark pulsing on her wrist, her whole body shaking with cold and the terrible emptiness of being unwanted. For a long moment, she did not move. She simply listened to the wind slide between the trees and wondered how many steps a rejected girl could take before the world forgot her name. Then something changed. The forest went quiet. Not peaceful. Watching. Avery turned her head slowly. Far between the trunks, where the torchlight could not reach, a pair of golden eyes opened in the dark. Then another. Then another. Dozens of them, silent and unmoving, surrounding the path ahead. Avery's breath caught in her throat. Wolves. She should have run. She should have screamed. But the largest shadow lowered its head, not like a hunter before prey, but like a guardian recognizing someone it had been sent to find. Avery did not run, because her legs had forgotten how. The golden eyes watched from between the pines, steady as lanterns under black water, and every instinct she had left told her the forest should have ended her there. Wolves did not follow a bleeding Packless Girl unless they wanted what little warmth remained in her body. Yet none of them lunged. None of them snarled. The largest shadow only moved when she moved, keeping the same quiet distance, as if the darkness itself had been assigned to escort her. Avery pressed her marked wrist against her chest and forced herself forward. Snow swallowed her feet with every step, burning cold up through her ankles, while the broken circle mark pulsed beneath her palm like a second heartbeat. It did not feel like a wound. It felt like a door being held shut from the other side. Her wolf was still there, somewhere deep and small, curled in silence. but the familiar thread of pack warmth was gone. The world had become too wide, too white, too empty. Behind her, Silverpine's gates were hidden by the storm. Ahead of her, the trees leaned close, whispering under the wind. Avery tried to count her breaths. 1, 2, 3. On the fourth, her knees struck the snow. She caught herself with both hands, and the cold bit into her fingers until they went numb. "Get up," she whispered, though no one was close enough to hear. Just one more mile. But she did not know if there was 1 mile left in her. She did not know if there was 100 feet. That was when she heard it. Not the wind, not the low shift of paws behind her. A smaller sound, thin, strained, almost swallowed by the storm. Avery lifted her head. To her right, beneath the bent roots of a fallen pine, something pale moved against the snow. At first she thought it was a scrap of cloth caught on a branch. Then it whimpered again. Avery pushed herself upright and stumbled toward it. The golden eyes in the forest shifted with her, every hidden wolf turning at once. Beneath the roots lay a young white wolf, not fully grown, its fur dusted with ice, one front paw caught under a twisted strip of old wire half buried in the snow. It was trembling so hard the roots above it shook. The pup bared tiny teeth when Avery came closer, but the sound that came from its throat was not fury. It was fear. "I know," Avery breathed, sinking slowly to her knees. "I know what it is like to be left where no one is supposed to find you." She had nothing. No knife, no coat, no healer's kit. Only shaking hands and a dress already stiff with snow. Carefully, she tore a strip from the hem and wrapped it around the wire so it would not scrape the pup further when she eased it loose. The small wolf snapped once in warning, stopping inches from her hand, but Avery did not pull away. "It is all right," she whispered. "You can hate me after you are free." Her fingers were clumsy from the cold, but she worked slowly, patiently, speaking in a voice so soft it barely rose above the snowfall. The watching wolves drew nearer. Avery could feel them now, not attacking, not threatening, just surrounding the clearing in a silent ring. The wire finally slipped loose. The white pup collapsed forward, and Avery caught it against her chest. It was warmer than she expected, alive and shivering and impossibly real. She held it for one breath longer than she meant to, because something in her broke at the simple weight of a creature choosing not to pull away. "There," she murmured. "You are free." The pup lifted its head and pressed its nose to her marked wrist. Avery stiffened. Its small tongue brushed the dark broken circle symbol, gentle as falling snow. Then the pup looked past her, toward the hidden wolves, and released a thin, trembling howl. The sound rose into the trees. Instantly, the entire forest answered with silence. Even the wind seemed to stop. Avery turned slowly, the pup cradled against her, and saw the largest black wolf step fully into the moonlight. Around its neck hung a dark metal crest shaped like a crowned wolf. Avery did not know royal markings. She did not know court sigils. But she knew, with a cold certainty that reached deeper than fear, that these were not wild wolves, and they had not found her by accident. The black wolf crossed the snow without making a sound, and the others parted for him, as if the forest itself had been waiting for his permission. He was enormous, taller at the shoulder than any wolf Avery had ever seen, with fur so dark it seemed to drink the moonlight. A thin silver scar curved over one eye, pale against the black, and the metal crest at his throat swung with every silent step. The crowned wolf. Avery had seen that symbol only once, stamped into the wax of a royal decree Silverpine kept locked behind glass. It belonged to the Blackwood throne. It belonged to Alpha King Mason Blackwood. Her arms tightened around the white pup, not from fear of the animal, but from the terrible understanding forming in her chest. These were not forest wolves. These were royal wolves, the kind mothers used to warn their children about when they wandered too close to forbidden borders. They answered only to the crown. They guarded royal blood. They hunted traitors, spies, and monsters out of the northern woods. And now they were standing around a packless Omega, as if she were something worth guarding. The black wolf stopped 3 feet away. His golden eyes lowered to the mark on her wrist, then to the pup in her arms. Avery expected him to take the little one from her. Instead, he lowered his massive head until his muzzle almost touched the snow. It was not quite a bow. It was too controlled, too watchful, too full of power. But it was not a threat. The white pup gave a tired whimper and reached one small paw toward him. The black wolf, Ronan, because somehow Avery knew a creature like him had to have a name, answered with a low rumble that settled the pup instantly. Avery should have felt relieved. Instead, the cold finally caught up with her. Her vision tilted. The trees stretched tall and thin, bending like dark cathedral pillars. She tried to set the pup down, but her hands refused to obey. Before she could fall forward, Ronan stepped beside her and pressed his warm flank against her shoulder. Another wolf moved behind her. A third lay down near her feet. One by one, the royal wolves formed a living circle around her, black and gray and silver bodies turning outward toward the forest, not inward toward her. They were not trapping her. They were shielding her from the storm. Avery let out a shaking breath that almost became a sob. "Why?" she whispered. "You do not even know me." Ronan looked back at her, and for one impossible heartbeat, she felt a voice without words pressed gently against her mind. "Found first. Safe first." The meaning was not spoken, but it filled the hollow place where her pack bond used to be. Avery closed her eyes, and warmth gathered around her from every side. She might have drifted there into darkness if not for the sudden flash of orange between the trees. Torches. Human voices. Boots breaking through crusted snow. Ronan lifted his head. Every wolf in the circle went still. Avery heard Beta Grant Hayes before she saw him. "Spread out," he called from somewhere beyond the pines. "She cannot have gone far. The mark will slow her." Avery's stomach turned cold in a way the winter could not explain. Grant had come after her. Not to bring her back. Not to show mercy. To make sure no one ever asked why a harmless Omega had been marked and thrown beyond the border in the middle of the night. The white pup stirred weakly in her arms, and Avery forced herself to stay awake. The torchlight grew brighter. Grant stepped into the clearing with 6 silver pine men behind him, all of them wrapped in heavy coats, all of them stopping at once when they saw the ring of wolves. For the first time that night, Grant Hayes looked afraid. His gaze moved from the black bodies in the snow to the crest at Ronan's throat. The color left his face. "No," he breathed. "Those are not wild wolves." Ronan moved forward one slow step, placing himself directly between Grant and Avery. The other wolves followed, silent as a closing door. Grant took a step back. His voice dropped into a whisper that carried through the frozen clearing. "Those are the Alpha King's wolves." The clearing did not move. Even the falling snow seemed to hang in place, suspended between one breath and the next, while Grant Hayes stared at the royal wolves like a man who had walked into a story meant to frighten children. Avery held the white pup closer, though her arms had begun to tremble so badly she could barely feel its warmth. Ronan stood between her and Silverpine's men, his scarred face lowered, his golden eyes bright, with a warning no one needed translated. Grant swallowed and lifted both hands, suddenly careful, suddenly respectful in a way he had never been with anyone weaker than himself. "There has been a misunderstanding," he said, his voice thin beneath the trees. "This girl is under Silverpine judgment. She is unstable, dangerous to herself and to any pack that shelters her." Avery tried to speak, but the cold had settled too deep in her chest. The words broke apart before they reached her tongue. Grant saw it. His confidence returned by inches. "She was marked for good reason," he continued, louder now, as if the wolves were a court he could persuade. "She has always had a strange effect on animals. We believe she may have drawn them here somehow." Ronan's lips lifted just enough to reveal white teeth, but he did not lunge. He only waited. That restraint frightened Grant more than any growl could have. Then the forest behind the royal wolves changed. Not with sound, with pressure. The air grew heavy, sharp with pine, winter wind, and something older than command. Every Silverpine man lowered his eyes at once, their bodies recognizing power before their minds caught up. Avery felt it move through the clearing like a storm given human shape. The wolves parted. A tall man stepped from the darkness wearing a black winter coat dusted with snow, his hair dark beneath the moonlight, his face unreadable, his gray eyes fixed first on Ronan, then on the pup in Avery's arms, and finally on Avery herself. Alpha King Mason Blackwood did not need a crown. The forest behaved as if he was one. Grant dropped to one knee so fast the snow jumped around him. "Your Majesty," he said, "we did not know your wolves were in this sector." Mason did not look at him. Clearly, his voice was quiet, but it carried more force than shouting. Avery had heard stories about him in kitchens and laundry rooms, whispered over steam and candle smoke. A king who ended border wars with a single letter. A man whose royal wolves could find a traitor through 3 states and a blizzard. She had imagined him distant, mythical, almost unreal. She had not imagined him standing 10 feet away, studying her like a mystery that might become a threat. Mason took 1 step forward. Ronan shifted, not away from Avery, but closer to her. A ripple passed through the other wolves. Mason stopped. For the first time, something flickered across his face. Not anger, not fear. Recognition that the world had done something impossible without asking his permission. "Ronan," he said softly, "come." The black wolf did not move. The silence that followed was so deep Avery could hear the white pup breathing against her collarbone. Grant's head lifted, his eyes widening. Mason's gaze hardened. Interesting. He looked at Avery's wrist. The packless mark pulsed dark against her pale skin. "Who marked you?" Avery opened her mouth, but Grant answered first. "Silverpine did, Your Majesty. Lawfully. She became a liability after repeated incidents. Tonight, she fled before we could complete her transfer beyond the border." It was such a clean lie. So smooth. So practiced. Avery felt something inside her sink, because men like Grant had always known how to make cruelty sound like order. Mason finally turned his eyes on him. "And you pursued a half-frozen Omega into royal hunting grounds with 6 armed men because you were concerned for her transfer." Grant went still. Avery's vision blurred at the edges, but she saw Mason glance at the pup. "And that cub?" Grant said nothing for half a second too long. Mason's expression cooled further. He looked toward his guards, who had emerged like silent shadows behind him. "Bring the girl to Blackwood Citadel. Bring the cub. Silverpine will remain exactly where it stands until I decide what law was broken here." 2 royal guards stepped forward. Avery flinched, and every wolf around her reacted at once. Ronan moved in front of her so quickly the guards stopped dead. The white pup gave a weak little sound and buried its face against Avery's dress. Mason watched it happen. The impossible loyalty, the silent refusal, the royal wolves choosing her comfort over his command. His jaw tightened. When he spoke again, his voice was low enough to freeze the breath in Avery's lungs. "No one touches her until I know why my wolves chose her." Avery woke to warmth so unfamiliar she thought she had died and mistaken mercy for an afterlife. Soft blankets covered her from shoulder to ankle, a fire glowed behind a glass screen, and snow tapped gently against tall windows instead of burying her beneath the trees. For 1 quiet second, she let herself breathe. Then she saw the stone walls, the black banners stitched with A. Crown Wolf, and the 2 royal guards standing outside the door. Not dead, then. Taken. The white pup slept in a padded basket beside her bed, one bandaged paw tucked beneath its chin, while Ronan lay across the threshold like a shadow carved from loyalty. The moment Avery tried to sit up, every wolf in the room opened its eyes. There were 4 of them inside, with more beyond the balcony doors, all watching her with a patience that felt older than speech. Avery pressed a hand to her wrist. The packless mark was still there, dark and cold against her pale skin, but someone had wrapped it in clean linen. Someone had washed the snow from her hair and placed a cup of warm broth on the bedside table. Kindness should not have frightened her. It did. Kindness always came with a price. The door opened without a knock, and Alpha King Mason Blackwood stepped in with a healer at his side. In daylight, he looked less like a myth and more dangerous because of it. Human. Real. Controlled. His dark coat was gone, replaced by a charcoal shirt and black trousers. Simple clothes that did nothing to soften the authority in his posture. Avery lowered her eyes on instinct. Mason noticed. "You are not a prisoner," he said. She almost laughed, but the sound would have broken in her throat. "There are guards at the door. There are enemies outside it." He looked toward Ronan, who had not moved. "And apparently, there are wolves inside it who refuse to leave." The healer, an older woman named Dr. Elaine Porter, approached Avery with careful hands and a professional calm that did not feel false. She checked the bandage on Avery's wrist, then paused. The room seemed to tighten around that pause. "This mark is not behaving like a standard packless seal," Dr. Porter said quietly. Mason's gaze sharpened. Avery's fingers curled into the blanket. "What does that mean?" "It means someone used the shape of exile to hide something else." Before Avery could ask what, Raised voices echoed from the hallway. The door opened wider, and a woman in a cream-colored suit stepped in as if every room had been built to welcome her. Madison Vale was beautiful in the polished way of expensive knives, pale. Hair swept back, blue eyes cool, smile gentle enough to pass for kindness if no one looked too closely. Behind her stood 2 council members in dark formal coats. Madison looked first at Avery, then at the wolves, then at Mason. "Your Majesty, the council is concerned. A Packless Omega in the royal wing invites questions, especially one who has unsettled your wolves." Ronan lifted his head. Madison took one small step back, so quick most people would have missed it. Avery did not. She had spent her life learning the tiny movements people made when fear interrupted pride. Mason did not raise his voice. "My wolves are not unsettled. They are sleeping outside her door. Then they are comfortable." Madison's smile thinned. "Or influenced." The word landed like frost. Avery felt the old, familiar shame rise inside her. The shame of being blamed for things she had never asked for and could not explain. She looked down at the pup, still sleeping because it trusted the room only while she was in it. "I did not call them," she said. Her voice was soft, but this time it held. "I did not ask them to find me. I only helped the little one because it was scared." For the first time since entering, Mason looked at her not as a problem, not as evidence, but as if she had given him the one detail that mattered. Dr. Porter unwrapped the linen from Avery's wrist and held a small crystal light over the mark. The broken circle flickered. Beneath the dark symbol, a faint silver pattern answered, delicate as moonlight under ice. Madison went very still. Dr. Porter breathed in sharply. "Your Majesty," she said, "this is not just a Packless mark. It is a cover seal." Mason stepped closer, his gray eyes fixed on the hidden glow beneath Avery's skin. "Covering what?" The crystal brightened, and the royal wolves rose all at once, silent and certain. Dr. Porter looked from Avery to Mason, her face pale with disbelief. A bloodline. By evening, Blackwood Citadel no longer felt like a refuge. It felt like a courtroom built inside a storm. Avery stood beneath the vaulted ceiling of the royal hall with a borrowed gray shawl wrapped around her shoulders, her marked wrist uncovered for everyone to see. The floor was black marble veined with silver, polished so perfectly it reflected the faces watching from above. Council members lined both sides of the chamber. Noble families whispered behind gloved hands. Madison Vale stood near the front in pale blue, calm as winter glass. Mason sat on the obsidian throne, not relaxed, not cruel, but still enough to make the entire room breathe carefully. Ronan and the royal wolves had been ordered behind a silver boundary circle at the edge of the hall, a ceremonial restraint meant for safety, not harm. But Avery could feel their displeasure like pressure against her ribs. The white pup was awake now, tucked inside a small heated carrier beside Dr. Elaine Porter, its bright eyes fixed only on Avery. Councilman Warren Pike rose first. "Avery Miller of Silverpine Pack, you stand before this court because the Alpha King's royal wolves defied direct command in your presence. You carry a Packless mark of disputed origin. You have been accused of manipulating royal beasts, concealing forbidden blood, and entering protected land under false circumstances." Avery looked at the shining floor. Her reflection looked smaller than she felt. "I did not enter royal land on purpose," she said. "I was left in the forest." A door opened at the far end of the hall, and Beta Grant Hayes walked in wearing a formal black coat, his expression arranged into sorrow. Avery's stomach tightened. He bowed low to Mason, then turned to the council. "Your Majesty, respected council, Silverpine did not abandon this girl. We acted after years of instability. Avery was gentle at times, yes, but animals behaved strangely around her. Wolves ignored hierarchy. Pups followed her. Sick pack members calmed when she entered rooms. We feared an unlawful influence." Murmurs spread through the hall. Madison lowered her lashes, but Avery saw the faint satisfaction at the corner of her mouth. Grant continued, smoother now. "The Packless mark was mercy. We hoped distance would end whatever hold she had over our wolves." Avery finally raised her eyes. "That is not true." Her voice shook, but it did not disappear. "You marked me because I found records. About my mother." The hall quieted. Grant's face changed for half a second, just enough. Mason saw it. Madison saw it too, and her fingers tightened around her silver clutch. Councilman Pike gestured toward the center of the room, where an ancient judgment stone rested on a pedestal. Then let the stone answer. If she is truly Packless, it will confirm her release. If she carries forbidden influence, it will expose the source. Dr. Porter stepped forward sharply. Her body is still recovering. The mark is unstable. Madison's voice cut in, soft and poisonous. If she is innocent, the stone will not harm her reputation. Avery walked forward before Mason could refuse for her. She was tired of powerful people deciding whether her silence meant guilt. She placed her palm on the cold stone. At first, nothing happened. Then the Packless mark on her wrist darkened, and the hidden silver pattern beneath it began to glow. The stone trembled. A sound like ice cracking across a frozen lake filled the hall. The broken circle symbol flickered once, twice, then split into threads of light that traveled up Avery's arm in delicate lunar lines. The judgment stone did not show the word Packless. It showed something older. Moonbound healer. Lost Luna line. The entire court went silent. Grant stepped back as if the words themselves had reached for him. Madison went pale. Behind the silver boundary, Ronan lowered his head, and every royal wolf followed. Not in fear, in recognition. Then the white pup struggled out of its carrier, small paws skidding on the marble as it made its way to Avery. No one moved to stop it. The pup pressed its forehead to her ankle, and Mason suddenly went still, his gray eyes widening as if he had heard a voice no one else could hear. Avery looked at him through the impossible silence. What is it? Mason rose from the throne, the word leaving him like a secret pulled from the deepest part of his wolf. It called you mother. The word mother had not finished echoing through the royal hall before every lie in the room began looking for a place to hide. Avery stood frozen with the white pup pressed against her ankle, the judgment stone still glowing beneath her hand, while the words moonbound healer shimmered in the air like moonlight caught in glass. For one impossible moment, no one spoke. Grant Hayes stared at her wrist as though the hidden silver lines had rewritten the world in a language he feared. Madison Vale recovered first. Her smile returned, but it was too thin now, too polished over panic. An old bloodline does not prove loyalty, she said. It only proves danger. Mason descended the throne steps slowly. No, he said. It proves someone had a reason to hide her. Grant moved half a step back. That was all. A small movement. Almost nothing. But Avery saw it, because she had spent years surviving people who revealed themselves in fractions. Mason saw it too. Before he could speak, the candles along the left wall flickered blue. A sweet metallic scent slipped into the hall, sharp and wrong, threading beneath the smell of wax and winter stone. Ronan surged against the silver boundary, not breaking it, but warning. The royal wolves behind him rose in perfect silence. Dr. Porter turned toward the western archway. Everyone stepped back from the vents. Too late. A pale mist rolled across the marble floor, thin as fog, carrying specks that glittered like ground stars. The council erupted into confusion. Nobles backed toward the walls. Guards moved to shield Mason. Madison lifted a handkerchief to her mouth, but her eyes went not to the mist, not to the wolves, but to Avery. Grant had already disappeared into the shifting crowd. The silver boundary around the royal wolves brightened, reacting to the mist, tightening into a circle of cold light. Ronan's body went rigid. The wolves were not attacking. They were trapped between instinct and restraint, their eyes fixed on Avery as if she were the only steady thing left in the hall. Avery understood then. This was not meant to destroy the court. It was meant to make the wolves look dangerous. It was meant to make her look guilty. They will blame me, she whispered. Mason turned sharply. Avery, stay where you are. But staying safe had never saved anyone smaller than the person giving the order. The white pup whimpered at her feet. The royal wolves shuddered under the pressure of the silver circle, not hurt, but frightened by a command they could not obey and a danger they could not reach. Avery stepped away from the judgment stone. The hidden lunar lines on her wrist glowed brighter, soft and silver beneath the broken Packless mark. Open the circle, she said. Councilman Pike looked horrified. Absolutely not. Mason's voice lowered. Avery. She looked at him, and for the first time, she did not lower her eyes. They saved me when I had nothing. I am not leaving them locked in fear. She crossed the marble before anyone stopped her and knelt at the edge of the boundary. The silver light licked cold over her fingers, but she did not pull back. She laid her palm flat against it and began to hum. The sound was low, untrained, almost fragile. Yet the moment it entered the air, the panic in the hall thinned. The white pup crawled to her side. Ronan lowered his head until his scarred brow touched the other side of the glowing line. Avery did not know the language rising through her voice. It felt older than memory, older than Silverpine, older than the laws that had named her worthless. The mist curled away from the wolves as if the song had become a clean wind. One by one, their trembling eased. Their eyes softened. The boundary dimmed, not broken by force, but released by recognition. Mason stood motionless in the center of the hall, watching the girl everyone had called Packless calm the most powerful wolves in the kingdom with nothing but mercy. Across the chamber, Grant reappeared near a side door, his face pale with the failure of his own plan. Madison reached for his sleeve, but he pulled away too quickly, exposing the silver key in his hand. Every council member saw it. Every guard saw it. Avery saw it last, because she was still focused on Ronan, still whispering through the final note until the black wolf stepped free and bowed his head at her knees. Mason's voice cut through the hall, quiet and final. Seal the doors. Grant froze. Madison went still. Avery rose slowly, the pup leaning against her ankle, the royal wolves calm behind her. For the first time in her life, the room was not asking whether she deserved to be protected. It was watching her protect what belonged to the king. By dawn, Silverpine Pack had gathered in the same courtyard where Avery had been cast out. Only this time the gates did not open for judgment against her. They opened for the crown. Snow lay smooth across the stones, hiding the marks of the night before, but not the memory of it. Avery stood at the edge of the royal carriage with the gray shawl around her shoulders and the white pup pressed close to her side, its heeled paw resting against her boot. Behind her, the Blackwood royal wolves moved in a silent line, Ronan at the front, his scar catching the pale morning light. Mason stepped down first. He wore no ceremonial crown, no jewels, no gold. Just a long black coat and the kind of stillness that made every Silverpine wolf lower their eyes before he spoke. Grant Hayes had been brought from Blackwood Citadel under guard, his polished certainty gone. Madison Vale stood near the council delegation, pale and silent, no longer smiling. Avery thought returning would make her feel small again. She had imagined the porch, the torches, the faces that had watched without helping. She had imagined her knees remembering the cold. But when she stepped through the gates, the royal wolves entered with her, and the courtyard changed. The same people who had looked at her like waste now looked at the wolves at her back and understood that the forest had carried the truth home. Caleb stood near the training steps, his face full of apology he had no right to offer. Avery looked past him. She was not here for apologies whispered too late. Mason walked to the center of the courtyard, then turned, not toward Grant, not toward the council, but toward the entire pack. Last night, an Omega was marked beyond law, abandoned beyond the border, and hunted into royal land under a lie. No one moved. Even the children were silent, tucked behind their mothers. Mason lifted his hand, and Dr. Porter brought forward the judgment stone from the citadel, now glowing faintly with the same silver pattern beneath Avery's skin. This court has already heard what the stone revealed. Moonbound healer. Lost Luna line. A bloodline. Hidden beneath a false mark. Whispers broke across the courtyard like thin ice. Grant tried to speak, but Mason's eyes cut to him, and the words died. I have one question for Silverpine. Mason's voice lowered, but somehow it reached every corner of the yard. Who marked my Luna as Packless and left her to die? The silence shattered, not into noise, into recognition. Every face turned toward Grant. Madison closed her eyes as if the question had sealed a door behind her. Avery's wrist began to glow beneath the linen. The broken circle mark darkened, fighting the light for one last breath, then split apart into silver threads that lifted from her skin like ash in reverse. She did not cry out. She only watched as the symbol that had named her unwanted dissolved into nothing. In its place, a crescent mark formed, soft and bright, curving over her pulse like moonlight choosing a home. The white pup pressed against her leg and gave a small, happy sound. Then Ronan stepped forward. The courtyard held its breath. The great black wolf passed Mason, past the council, past every alpha-born warrior in Silverpine, and sat at Avery's feet. One by one, the royal wolves followed. Black, gray, and silver bodies formed a circle around her, not trapping her, not hiding her, but presenting her to the pack that had thrown her away. Avery looked at the faces before her, and for the first time, they looked back without power over her. Mason removed his own black cloak and placed it gently around her shoulders, warm from his body, heavy with the scent of pine and winter air. Avery Miller is under Blackwood protection, he said. By blood, by bond, and by the choice of my wolves. Grant sank to his knees in the snow, not because anyone forced him, but because every lie he had built had finally become too heavy to carry. Avery did not smile at his fall. She only lowered one hand to Ronan's head and felt the steady warmth of the wolf who had found her before death did. The courtyard that had once cast her out now stood witness as the girl they had named Packless became the one creature even the Alpha King's wolves refused to leave. The judgment of Silverpine did not come with screaming, fire, or spectacle. It came with silence, written seals, and the steady voices of witnesses who could no longer pretend they had seen nothing. Grant Hayes was stripped of rank before the Royal Council and sent to a remote holding estate to await a lawful trial. Madison Vale lost her claim to the Luna candidacy the moment Dr. Porter placed the silver key on the council table, and every hidden door in her story opened at once. Silverpine Pack was placed under royal supervision until every Omega, servant, orphan, and low-ranked wolf inside its borders could be heard without fear. Avery stood beside Mason through all of it, wrapped in his black cloak, the new crescent mark glowing softly at her wrist. She expected triumph to feel brighter. Instead, it felt quiet, heavy, like setting down a burden she had carried so long her hands no longer knew how to open. When the council asked what punishment she wished for the pack that had abandoned her, the entire courtyard went still. Grant lifted his head from where he knelt in the snow, not with hope, but with dread. Caleb stared at the ground. The women from the kitchens wept into their sleeves. Avery looked at them and felt the old wound inside her tremble, but not reopen. She thought of the forest, the cold, the golden eyes waiting between the trees. She thought of the white pup, who now sat proudly at her side as if it had personally rewritten the law. Then she looked at Mason. His gray eyes held no command for her, only patience. For the first time in her life, a powerful man was not telling her what mercy should cost. Avery faced the council. No Omega will carry a packless mark for being poor, weak, orphaned, unwanted, or inconvenient, she said. Her voice was soft, but it reached every porch, every stair, every lowered head. No child will be left without heat because someone calls them dead weight. No servant will be punished for asking to survive. If Silverpine wants to remain a pack, it will learn what that word means. Mason's expression did not change, but something in his eyes warmed, like dawn touching frozen glass. Councilman Pike bowed his head. It will be written into royal law. Only then did. Avery breathed. The royal wolves rose around her, and Ronan pressed his scarred head beneath her hand. His fur was warm, solid, real. The white pup leaned against her boot and yawned, entirely unbothered by the history being made around him. A few Silverpine wolves bowed because Mason was king. Then, slowly, others bowed because Avery was looking at them, and they understood that the girl they had refused to protect had chosen to protect those beneath them anyway. By sunset, Blackwood Citadel waited beyond the northern road, its towers catching the last gold of the sky. Avery rode beside Mason in the open carriage, not hidden behind guards, not covered in shame, but seated where everyone could see her. The royal wolves moved on both sides like a living river of black, gray, and silver. For miles, no one spoke. The world seemed to be listening to the snow melt from the branches. At last, Mason looked at the crescent mark on her wrist. They tried to make you belong to no one, he said. Avery looked ahead, where the citadel rose against a clear evening sky. Maybe that was their mistake. The white pup climbed clumsily into her lap and tucked its head beneath her hand. Ronan trotted beside the carriage, golden eyes steady on the road. Behind them, Silverpine grew smaller. Before them, the first lights of Blackwood glowed like stars coming home. Avery had spent her whole life standing at the edge of rooms, waiting to be allowed inside. Now the gates of the Alpha King opened before her, and every royal wolf behind her lifted its head to the rising moon. She was not the girl left in the snow anymore. She was not the mark they carved, not the name they gave, not the silence they expected her to carry. She was Avery Miller, moonbound healer of the lost Luna line, chosen not because she had demanded a crown, but because